Hey, hello, welcome back to my channel. This month, I am doing a reading vlog for John Steinbeck's Once There Was a War. Because guys, did you know that once there was a war? Actually, it was twice. There was two. Anyway, I have no way to determine how far into this I am because I did not pay attention to the page count. And this book doesn't really have chapters. It has, I don't know what it has. These are his actual like correspondence that he sent when he was a war correspondent, and then he collected them years and years later and shoved them in a book. So there's three main sections to the book, and then you don't really have chapters. You just have a break between his correspondence dispatches. You have a break between dispatches. So this book has a foreword and an introduction, and then the book. The foreword was written by somebody else, and then the introduction was written by Steinbeck as he kind of reflected on his collecting all of these dispatches, him rereading them after so many years, and then kind of giving the reader a little bit of information, which I ignored the foreword. I don't like forewords. I don't like introductions. Don't tell me about this writer. Don't tell me about this book. Because I feel like they spoil things. And like, if I'm going to read a foreword, I'm going to read it after the book. Anyway, I did read Steinbeck's introduction though, because it was by the author, and I feel like the author wanted me to know something before I started. And I am glad that I read that because he talks about how what you're reading is curated at the time of being written. So he points out that dispatchers, war correspondents really could not put all of the reality of war into it because one, military censors were just gonna shred the entire thing. You could write as honestly as you wanted, it was never gonna reach the light of day. Two, there was this huge pressure to support the war effort, and he talks about how disingenuous that is, where you can't demoralize the country back home that you're writing for if you tell them how terrible war is, because then nobody's going to want to go to war anymore. But it is this kind of, I don't know the actual term, I don't know the correct term, but like mob mentality in a way. It's this collective refusing to admit to reality, but all buying into the same delusion that war is not that bad, that war is noble, that war is anything more than chaos and destruction on an unprecedented scale. So he does basically tell the reader, take all of this with a grain of salt. And he talks about how correspondents really weren't intentionally deceptive. But if they were going to get anything back home, they had to not write about certain things. They had to change certain details. Like he said, places, any place name. He talks about how in one dispatch he made a reference to ancient Greece, to places that don't even exist anymore. And he put the name of two cities in this ancient, I think it was a Grecian poem. I don't remember if he was talking about the Iliad. I don't remember what he was talking about. The military censors chopped it out because it was a place, and they didn't take any time to understand that these places are a reference to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years in the past. So anyway, take everything with a grain of salt. That being said, I do like salt. I am enjoying Once There Was a War so much more than I enjoyed A Farewell to Arms. Steinbeck's writing style, not overly flowery, but he does give you really cute imagery sometimes. He gives you very relatable imagery. His dispatches are, I can see why he would have been such a popular war correspondent at the time, because this wasn't just a journalist who was reporting on news events. This was an author. This is a writer who is reporting on events, and he's doing it through the lens of a writer. And it's so much more, oddly enough to say, it's so much more enjoyable. Now, I'm not very far into it, so the entirety of my enjoyment, because that is a weird thing to say about actual historical events surrounding war, the section that I'm in is the troops getting on the troop ship and shipping out to their location. And it's the imagery of all of these young men on a ship crossing the ocean to get to where they're going to be fighting. So no actual war has happened, no battles, no anything. I am enjoying his telling of this mass of humanity, these young men, and their lack of individuality because of what they are now, this army unit, but then these sparks of individuality that kind of, are still visible in this massive human pile. Very, very interesting so far. And if this writing style continues, I do think I'm going to enjoy this a lot more. I actually ended up highlighting and noting quite a lot in just Steinbeck's introduction. The introduction to his book was better than the entirety of A Farewell to Arms. I said it. Fight me. What I am finding, though, the thing that I am struggling with the most is reading it, even though I'm enjoying reading it. And I think it's because I bought an ebook. And here's this, I don't understand this. This is what's making me absolutely weirded out is I love everything about ebooks. I love the concept of ebooks. I love that I have my book with me 24/7 because it's on my phone, which syncs to my iPad, and I will have one of those anywhere. I think it will also be on my laptop if I ever bothered to open the Books app on my laptop, which I think I did once years ago. It's an old laptop. So I love that I have it with me regardless of where I am. I love that I can choose multiple highlight colors. I can choose any color I want. I love that I can search by my highlights, that if I just hit highlights, it'll show me everything I've highlighted, and I can also search through them. I love that it lets me take notes that are marked as a tiny little icon, but that doesn't muck up the page. I love that I can search for my notes. I love that I can search the entire book in case I didn't highlight something, but I vaguely remember how it was written. I love everything about these ebooks. I can't read these ebooks. I have to keep reminding myself, Cameron, you have a book to read. You have to go on your phone or on your iPad and actually read it. For A Farewell to Arms, I could sit down and get through 30 or 50 pages in a sitting, no problem. Why can't I do this with my phone? I don't get it. I don't get it. Everything about ebooks I love except reading it, I guess. So I have got to figure that out so that I can get through this book in February on time. It is now the 10th, and I need to pick up the pace. So far, I would say easily starting at a 3-star baseline. Really enjoying this book. So I will check in with you guys once I have remembered to read more, and I'll continue to give my impressions. So editing Cameron here. The clip that you just saw was 2 weeks ago. Now the clip you're about to see was yesterday. I look the exact same. I just realized that I am wearing the exact same thing. I'm wearing my hair the exact same way. And for a minute, I couldn't even tell. And I had to check the timestamp on the video. Apparently, when I'm not working in the office, I do not change my clothes or something. I don't know. So they are actually done at different times. Just pretend that they look different to give you a sense of progression in time. That's all I can say. Welcome back. Feels very maniacal. I am halfway through the book. I have 44 highlights, and I'm not going to share all of them, but I do want to bring out a couple of points. So on page 6, I had my first highlight. In ancient Greece, it was said that there had to be a war at least every 20 years because every generation of men had to know what it was like. With us, we must forget, or we could never indulge in the murderous nonsense again. The way that Hemingway writes, I feel like he is far more practical and pragmatic about his experiences in the war. And what's interesting is, as a war correspondent, he does try to be very honest, and he admits that he has to do some softening of his writing. Very interesting commentary. I don't know what I expected. I don't know if I expected him to be more like, not pro-war per se, but that it is a glorious thing. But I think Hemingway felt that way to me. He talks about, in A Farewell to Arms, he talks about how do I want to put this? A Farewell to Arms was Hemingway becoming fed up with the war, but specifically because he wasn't being recognized as a soldier and a war hero, because he was an officer in the Italian army, and they started to the officers during one of the large retreats, and so he was then targeted because of that, and especially because he's an American. He didn't seem like he fit in, so there was the excuse of, oh, he's a spy, he's a traitor. Like, yes, he had found love, if you can call it that. He had found that he could have a better life outside the army, and his ennui kind of, had dissipated. And so he finally had something to actually want to live for instead of to just be in a war and, hope you didn't die that day. He didn't really have a lot of commentary, though, on how pointless war is, how destructive it is, outside of like general discussions about bombings and shellings and things, but nothing about what it does on a personal level, really. And I very much was looking for that in A Farewell to Arms, and I didn't get it. Steinbeck, on the other hand, has a lot of commentary, and he works it in very cleanly so that the censors don't really have anything that they can say against it. And that was one of the things that really hit me, was that commentary about ancient Greece. Already, by page 6, I am enjoying Steinbeck's writing style way more. He is more evocative with his imagery. He's funnier. And I think he has more commentary, and it's very easily accessible to the average reader. So this is still in his introduction. I have another highlight here where he is trying to compile his old correspondences for making this book. So as a result, he's rereading all of his old works, and he says, reading them over, after all these years, I realize not only how much I have forgotten, but that they are period pieces, the attitudes archaic, the impulses romantic. And in the light of everything that has happened since, perhaps the whole body of work untrue and warped and one-sided. Thank you. Thank you. That is the commentary that I came here for. And I will even disagree with him a little bit. Yes, it is probably very skewed, very warped, very pro-war agenda, but he still manages to put in these gems of kind of gently, subtly calling the reader's mind to critically think about some of these things. So I absolutely have loved some of his commentary and the way that he skillfully worked these in. I have a lot highlighted in his introduction, very, very along those lines. Oh, this is really cute. I don't know why this was cute. This was really cute to me. So the beginning of his actual novel, his first correspondence that he includes, June 20th, 1943, and he's talking about all the troops that are getting on these troop ships to be shipped to their final destination, or their initial destination from which they'll be dispersed. The troops in their thousands sit on their equipment on the deck. It is evening, and the first of the dim-out lights comes on. The men wear their helmets, which make them all look alike, make them look like long rows of mushrooms. Tell me that doesn't evoke the imagery in your head. All of these troops on the deck of a shop, the deck of a ship, and in their army helmets, the way that they're just a mass of people in these rounded helmets just look like just mushrooms shot up out of the deck. I just think that is so funny. There is little talking, no singing, and as dusk settles into dark, you cannot tell one man from another. With your helmet on, you are a mushroom in a bed of mushrooms. Okay, Hemingway, you couldn't have given me just one of these in your entire novel. Nothing. And Steinbeck has given it to me on page 9. So one of the things that I had a big criticism about Hemingway is his use of repetition. And I had a couple of examples in my last video where on the very first page, the word dust was used like 4 times. Leaves was used 4 times, I think. Troops and soldiers was used 3 or 4 times. It was repetitive for no purpose. I personally, it was absolutely intentional. I did not like it stylistically. I don't think it was well executed. Then I hit a passage from Steinbeck that had some repetition as well. but I really liked how he did it. The mist begins to come in over the sea. It is overcast and a light rain begins to fall. It is good sailing weather because a submarine could not see us 200 yards away. The ship is a gray, misty shape, slipping through a gray mist and melting into it. The great troop ship sneaks past the city and the tugs leave her, a dark thing steaming into the dark. I don't know why it was so different. I do know why it was different. Because Hemingway just used the same word to mean the same thing, to say the same thing over and over again. Steinbeck is comparing two different things. A dark thing, the ship, steaming into the dark, the night, the existence outside of the ship. The ship is a gray, misty shape, slipping through a gray mist and melting into it. He's taking two different things, comparing them, turning them into something that is almost the same as it kind of merges and melds into itself. That, I think, is well done. I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed the imagery that it gave me. And it was way different from Hemingway's. It was snowing outside because it was cold, and the cold caused the snow. Like, it's the same thing for no purpose. Okay, so that subtle commentary that I talked about. It is gratifying to see that our new army has gone back to the old-fashioned virtues our forefathers lied about. Yep. If that's not relevant, I don't know what is. That's another thing that I'm really enjoying about Steinway's. That's another thing that I'm really enjoying about Steinbeck's work here is he's pointing out the hypocrisy, he's pointing out the irony, and his commentary is just as poignant and accurate in today's climate as it was back in World War II. The army, the political machine, going back to the old-fashioned virtues that our forefathers lied about. On the next page, there's a sentence here. There is no war song for this war. Nothing has come along yet. The reason that this jumped out at me is because there is a MASH episode. And it's Dear Uncle Abdul. It's when Klinger is writing home to his uncle about his life in the 4077. One of the main stories of that episode is Father Mulcahy realizing that there's no war song for the Korean War. All of the major wars before it had kind of its own war song. And, you know, Hawkeye, being the snide, glib character that he is, was like, that's what this war is missing. A war song. Well, Mulcahy, why don't you write it? So Mulcahy goes through a few versions of the song throughout the episode, trying to have one upbeat and kind of catchy and cute and sweet. And the final part of the episode ends with Mulcahy singing. I'm going to try it, and if this is terrible, I'm going to edit this out, but I'm going to try to put in the actual scene from the show. I'm not a good singer, so I do apologize if this makes it into the final cut. No one's singing war songs now like people used to do. No over there, no praise the Lord, no glory, hallelujah. Perhaps at last we've asked ourselves what we should have asked before. With the pain and death this madness brings, what were we ever singing for? So if that was terrible, instead you'll have seen the actual MASH part of it. His character singing that, just, even though I've seen the episode a million times, it gives me goosebumps every time. With the pain and death this madness brings, what were we ever singing for before? Like, so Steinbeck talking about the fact that there's no war song for this kind of gave me that same feeling. Like, eventually the war song kind of aged itself out, and I don't know whether it was because there was more of a collective consciousness of like, this isn't anything to sing about, this isn't anything to glorify and to, you know, to rally around in the way that people used to with the Great War and all those other things. Okay. This next one was he's describing as they're landing and they're docking. The little boat puffs up the dock, which has mysteriously become a quay, pronounced key, which is, of course, ridiculous because the word is spelled Quay. It's pronounced key in a lot of places. I have heard dictionary pronunciations pronounce it quay. I've always read it as quay. I have heard other people say, no, it's key. And I just remember an episode of a streaming thing. I'm not gonna mention it here, but where the person who was hosting a game was struggling to pronounce it. He was trying to pronounce it quay, and everybody else is like, I think it's key, and then he ended up looking it up, and it pronounced it both ways, and he's like, see, I'm not wrong. But the fact that Steinbeck's commentary is coming along with it, it's not a novel in the sense of it's a pure piece of fiction, and it's not simply a war correspondence in that we were at this place on this date and this battle happened and this many people died or we had this victory or this loss. He is providing commentary, he's providing humor in a lot of what he's doing, but also he talks about the seriousness of it. He talks about, the men who are injured. There's a lot of emotion with his writing in these simple war correspondences, and I just am finding it absolutely enthralling to read. And then the last piece I'm going to talk about is he talks about a guy that they call Big Train, and I think it's, Big Train Mulligan is the guy's name. He reminds me of a cross, this is so weird, he reminds me of a cross between Klinger and Radar. Radar because he's very kind and has like a photographic memory of things that you'd be surprised that anybody would remember so distinctly. And Klinger because like Radar he could wheel and deal, but like a little bit more like the way that Klinger approached it as far as his sneakiness and ingenuity. But one of the things that it talks about, this guy is always able to get girls to come up and talk to him and feel comfortable with him. His handling of women and girls, thank you for distinguishing, his handling of women and girls is neither wolfish nor subtle. It consists of his being genuinely interested in them. He speaks to them with a kind of affectionate courtesy, is a stickler for decorum of all kinds. Treating women like people. Who would have thought? The fact that type of thing gets included in his war correspondence, his writings back home about war. I am really loving this book. This isn't something I would ever have picked up, honestly, if it weren't for Game of Tomes. I don't really like books specifically about war, even though I'm reading 3 at the same time. I'm still working on All Quiet on the Western Front, which the writing is phenomenal, and I think it's going to compete with my rating between that and Steinbeck. Hemingway, no comparison. It's actually, here's the other thing I'm finding, it is literally hard to compare them because one is a fictionalized novel, even though it's sort of written like an autobiography, and the other is a non-fictional but admittedly fluffed set of war correspondences from an actual war. So they're not really a one-to-one comparison. So like I said, I'm halfway through. I absolutely have to finish this. I am struggling with this ebook. I don't know what it is, but ebooks, I have a hard time getting through. And this is short. So I'm going to try my best to get as much reading done today as I can. It is the 23rd of February. I have 5 days left. So the next time I see you, I will just be giving you a wrap-up, probably, of this book. Hopefully, I will be giving you a wrap-up of this book.